Calliope. "Sing, Muse," he says, and the edge in his voice makes it clear that this is not a request. If I were minded to accede to his wish, I might say that he sharpens his tone on my name like a warrior drawing his dagger across a whetstone, preparing for the morning's battle. But I am not in the mood to be a muse today. Perhaps he hasn't thought of what it is like to be me. Certainly he hasn't. Like all poets, he thinks only of himself. But it is surprising that he hasn't considered how many other men there are like him, every day, all demanding my unwavering attention and support. How much epic poetry does the world really need? Every conflict joined, every war fought, every city besieged, every town sacked, every village destroyed, every impossible journey, every shipwreck, every homecoming, these stories have all been told, and countless times. Can he really believe he has something new to say? And does he think he might need me to help him keep track of all his characters, or to fill those empty moments where the meter doesn't fit the tale? He is wearing a beautiful gold brooch, tiny leaves wrought into a gleaming knot. So someone has rewarded him handsomely for his poetry in the past. He has talent, and he has prospered, no doubt with my assistance. But still he wants more, and I wish I could see his face properly in the light. I wait for him to open his eyes, but I have already made up my mind. If he wants my help, he will make an offering for it. That is what mortals do. First they ask, then they beg, finally they bargain. So I will give him his words when he gives me that brooch. I'm not offering him the story of one woman during the Trojan War. I'm offering him the story of all the women in the war. Well, most of them. I haven't decided about Helen yet. She gets on my nerves. If he tells me to sing one more time, I think I might bite him. The presumption of these men is extraordinary. Does he believe I have nothing else to do with my time than sit around being his muse? His! When did poets forget that they serve the muses and not the other way around? And if he can remember new lines of verse during his recitations, why can't he remember to say please? Does everyone have to die? He asks, plaintive like a child. Perhaps he thought he was writing about one of those other wars. Devastation is what happens in war. It is its nature. I murmur to him in his dreams sometimes. I do have other things to do, but I like how he looks when he sleeps. You knew Achilles would die. You knew Hector would die before him. You knew Patroclus would die. You've told their stories before. If you didn't want to think of men cut down in battle, then why would you want to compose epic verse? Ah, but now I see the problem. It's not their deaths he's upset about. It's that he knows what's coming, and he's worrying it will be more tragedy than epic. I watch his chest rising and falling as he grabs a fitful rest. Men's deaths are epic. Women's deaths are tragic. Is that it? He has misunderstood the very nature of conflict. Epic is countless tragedies woven together. Heroes don't become heroes without carnage, and carnage has both causes and consequences. Those don't begin and end on a battlefield. If he truly wants to understand the nature of the epic story I am letting him compose, he needs to accept that the casualties of war aren't just the ones who die, and that a death off the battlefield can be more noble, more heroic, if he prefers it that way, than one in the midst of fighting. But it hurts, he said when Creusa died. He would rather her story had been snuffed out like a spark failing to catch damp kindling. It does hurt, I whispered. It should hurt. She isn't a footnote, she's a person, and she, all the Trojan women, should be memorialised as much as any other person. Their Greek counterparts too. War is not a sport, to be decided in a quick bout on a strip of contested land. It is a web which stretches out to the furthest parts of the world, drawing everyone into itself. I will teach him this before he leaves my temple, or he will have no poem at all. You know, I like her. Oenone, I mean. I know the poet grows weary of these women who appear and disappear from his story, but even he is starting to grasp that the whole war can be explained this way. And would he really have overlooked Laodamia, as so many poets have before him? A woman who lost so much so young deserves something, even if it's just to have her story told, doesn't she? There are so many ways of telling a war. The entire conflict can be encapsulated in just one incident. One man's anger at the behaviour of another, say. A whole war, all 10 years of it, might be distilled into that. But this is the women's war, just as much as it is the men's, and the poet will look upon their pain, the pain of the women who have always been relegated to the edges of the story, victims of men, survivors of men, slaves of men, and he will tell it. or he will tell nothing at all. They have waited long enough for their turn. And for what reason? Too many men telling the stories of men to each other. Do they see themselves reflected in the glory of Achilles? Do their aging bodies feel strong when they describe his youth? Is the fat belly of a feasted poet reminiscent of the hard muscles of Hector? The idea is absurd. And yet there must be some reason why they tell and retell tales of men. If he complains to me again, I will ask him this. Is Oenone less of a hero than Menelaus? He loses his wife, so he stirs up an army to bring her back to him, costing countless lives and creating countless widows, orphans, and slaves. Oenone loses her husband, and she raises their son. Which of those is the more heroic act? So he does have children, my poet. Or he once had them. Tears flow from his blind eyes. He can't look at me. Can't bear what he's just composed. I want to reach down and stroke his hair and tell him everything will be all right, but it wouldn't be true. Who could say that about a war? He was expecting something else from me, I suppose. I depend on war for my very existence. But depending on it means I need to understand it, and if he wishes to write about it, so must the poet. He is learning that in any war, the victors may be destroyed as completely as the vanquished. They still have their lives, but they have given up everything else in order to keep them. They sacrifice what they do not realize they have until they have lost it. And so the man who can win the war can only rarely survive the peace. The poet may not want to learn this, but he must. Sing, muse, he said, and I have sung. I have sung of armies and I have sung of men. I have sung of gods and monsters. I have sung of stories and lies. I have sung of death and of life, of joy and of pain. I have sung of life after death. And I have sung of the women in the shadows. I have sung of the forgotten, the ignored, the untold. I have picked up the old stories and I have shaken them until the hidden women appear in plain sight. I have celebrated them in song because they have waited long enough. Just as I promised him, this was never the story of one woman or two, it was the story of all of them. A war does not ignore half the people whose lives it touches, so why do we? They have waited to have their story told, and I will make them wait no longer. If the poet refuses the song I have offered him, I will take it away and leave him silent. He has sung before. He may not want it and does not need it, but the story will be told. Their story will be told, no matter how long it takes. I am ageless, undying. Time does not matter to me. All that matters is the telling.